Well, here we go again. Take your work and gaming experience to the next level with the ViewSonic XG340C 2K ultra-wide high-end display. The XG340C 2K 34-inch 100Hz ultra-wide monitor features HDMI 2.1, AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, a 1000R curved screen, VESA display HDR 400 and 1 millisecond response time for the ultimate immersive gaming experience. And take control of multiple devices with KVM support while also taking full control of your display via the Elite Display Controller. To see the full list of specs and features, follow the sponsored link in the description below. Getting real sick of this. I've always wanted to do that. Anyway, here we go. So we are talking about now, you guys have probably seen over the last week or so, this developing story again regarding AMD graphics cards failing, this time not 7000 series graphics cards, but 6000 series graphics cards, specifically the 6800 and the 6900 and their XT variants. This one comes to us directly from Chris Fix, which is a German, not to be confused with the automotive Chris Fix, that's CHRIS. This is Chris Fix in Germany, which is KRIS Fix. So anyway, he's a GPU/electronics repair shop out in Germany. And he does lots of PCB repairs and just general electronics repairs and stuff. Think of how like Louis Rossmann is here, which Louis also specializes heavily in Apple stuff as well. Chris Fix in Germany does the same sort of thing. And there's this interesting correlation. He noticed that since December, which is only about 3 weeks ago at this point, in the last 3 weeks, he's received about 61 GPUs, either 6800 or 6900. Like, he didn't say what the split was of which, how many of each card, but he noticed that out of those 60 or 61, I can't remember exactly which number it is, it's not stating it right here in the article. It is a video that he put up, by the way. I will link the video, you guys should go and watch it. It's not that long, but he shows you some pretty troubling stuff. 48 of them had the same defect. And what's that defect? Well, the core is either cracked or ripped in half. It's kind of crazy the way that this particular error is coming about. I want to preface this by saying this video is not another like, let's jump on AMD and say they're a terrible company. This is a heads up to you that might be running the 6000 series graphics cards that this could be a problem, and there's some speculation as to what the problem is and some recommendations I have for you to kind of limit your exposure to this particular problem until AMD is able to put some manpower on this one, because obviously they're still got their hands full with the bad batch of 7000 series vapor chamber coolers, which are causing overheating graphics cards all over the place. This is now only about 6 days old at the time of making this video, and it's just not good for AMD to have to deal with this. So this is not a doom and gloom, oh my God, AMD is terrible. This is something you need to be aware of kind of a thing. So the 6000 series graphics cards are 2 years old. They've been out for a while. And it's interesting because if you look at these photos right here, you'll see as he takes the coolers apart, on some of them, it's just ripping the die in half. Technically, it's not ripping the die in half when they take it apart. The die is already split. It's just because of the thermal interface material, the part that broke stuck to the cooler when you take it off, and part sitting there on the substrate, and part is sitting there on the cooler. And so these are cards that died for whatever reason, and then they would send them into Chris Fix, and this is what he was noticing, kind of like this troubling amount of, oh my goodness, what is happening here? Now, it's also very important to preface, this is one repair facility, and this is one sample size of about 60-ish cards. So it's not very big. What's troubling is of the sample size that he has personally, the amount of them that have this same problem. Now you gotta ask yourself, what's happening here? Well, BuildZoid kind of jumped in and was just explaining that, hey, a GPU that's allowed to get hot enough, I'm talking about the die itself, the actual silicon, if it's allowed to get hot enough, it will shatter. It will break. So if you overlay the timeline on the 3 weeks or so that he's received these 61 cards, and I confirm there's 61 cards and 48 of them came back with like physically damaged GPU dies, it also lines up with the December Adrenalin 22.11.2 Wiggle driver that was released. In fact, BuildZoid even kind of commented on this saying, yeah, if too much voltage makes it to the silicon, it absolutely can crack it. And there was also some, apparently, I haven't double checked this myself, but there was some discussion about that fact that that particular driver also allows the disabling of thermal protection for your graphics card. And that would be for like extreme overclocking type needs. That could physically have an impact on the card if the fact that that driver is allowing users to do that. Now, a user would have to go in and specifically enable that functionality and then probably overclock the crap out of their card and then have some sort of a cooler failure all happening at the same time, because the cooler is still gonna allow the card to stay within its its perimeter range of operation, because unless you start pushing the voltages, you're not gonna push the cooler and the card beyond its operational, like, the range of which it's supposed to operate temperature-wise. Now, one of the things that was noticed here when Crispix starts analyzing these broken dies, now 48 out of 61, that's pretty significant on the amount of them having this physical damage. What was noticed about this specifically though, is the fact that it's not just that they died, but all 48 of them had shorted SoC rails. So we're talking like the voltage rail for the memory, the voltage rail for the memory controller, and the voltage rail for the GPU, all had physical shorts in them. Now, it's not known if that's happening because of something that changed with the driver, and this is where I myself become a little bit confused as to how a driver update could cause this, because typically drivers don't change a major function of the mechanical aspect of the card. By mechanical, I mean the electric current going through it. Drivers typically just tell the card how to handle different APIs, how to handle certain engine upgrades when it comes to shaders and stuff in games and whatnot. It doesn't physically change anything with the card's voltages and stuff. That would be specifically with a firmware. So unless the Adrenalin software is also somehow updating firmware with some sort of a bad version, even that process isn't automatic, because every single update I've ever had to do to vBIOS on any AMD graphics card or NVIDIA comes with a standalone updater, not built into the drivers on either of them. So I'm not entirely sure how a quote unquote driver update could personally cause this, but it doesn't mean that I'm right.
NZXT's Build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. Want to build your own PC but still have the NZXT Peace of Mind warranty? Then the new BLD Build It Yourself kit has what you want. Buy it and build it yourself, and NZXT has you covered. To get started configuring or building your next gaming PC, visit the build link in the description below.
It's just there's this correlation between the driver update, 22.11.2, and these 6800 and 6900 cards dying. Now, Crispix does mention that there were AIBs involved in this sample, so it's not limited to like the 7900 XTX issue regarding the vapor chamber is specific to the AMD supplied cooler because they had a bad batch of coolers that did not have enough water in them, creating a situation where it wasn't able to wick the temperature away properly. So this does not include just the AMD card, the AMD cooler, which is what you see here in this case with the 6900. So it's kind of a wider sample set having something to do specifically with the core. Now here's the other thing. The voltage delivery system and all of that is different on the AIB cards versus the AMD reference card. Like from each manufacturer kind of has their own PCB layout and design. So if they're all not all, but if we were seeing this sample size of 61, again, not very big, but the fact that we have 48 out of 61 showing this physical damage is a scarier sign of like what is actually happening here. So this is where I said I was gonna give you guys some, hey, this is not let's dogpile on AMD while they're already down. What I would personally recommend is if you're running 22.11.2, maybe roll back a previous version. That's the only correlation so far that can be determined on what's happening between the failures and just the timeline, is that particular driver. So it's also not the first time we have seen drivers cause stability / damage to graphics cards. Oftentimes it has something weird to do with like a fan curve or something like that, allowing the cards to get too hot. But again, thermal protection would have to be disabled for that to not start shutting itself down. I mean, if you talk about how hot it would have to get to actually physically damage the GPU, it's crazy. You're gonna smell it, you're gonna see smoke. It's just had to have been a pretty spectacular failure in a way. Remember, we did a video where we disabled the cooler entirely and took it off a card. It was an NVIDIA card, not an AMD card, but still took it off the card, and the thermal shutdown was at about 110 C. But even then, it didn't cause any physical damage to the card. Once we put thermal paste back on it, put a cooler back on it, it ran fine. So they have to get extremely hot. I mean, you can see all of the individual transistors and stuff with the way they're split in half. It's just kind of scary. And he saw, if you watch his video, you'll see the damage ranged from portions of the die chunked out to the whole die split in two. So there's the range at which they're dying in terms of like how spectacular is kind of varying. And it's kind of scary. So roll back your driver to something prior to 22.11.2, even if it's a beta, because this isn't gonna be harmful for you to roll back your driver. It's safe, it's free. You might end up with some game instabilities depending on that driver and what games it's designed to support. I can't think of any games that have come out very recently that driver might have been specific for. That's a risk worth taking though, of having your game not play at its best versus not having your graphics card live another day. I mean, I don't know about you, but a 6800 or 6900, I mean, these cards were $800 to $1,200 or $1,100, whatever they were. That's not a cheap card to try and replace, because guess what? 6000 series are not that easy to find anymore. They are becoming more scarce, and sure as hell aren't gonna want to pay NVIDIA prices right now. So I'm sorry, you actually work. I shouldn't do that to you, so sorry. Anyway, roll back your driver and just kind of keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on your temperatures. The problem is where it's failing in those voltages that I'm mentioning are not something that's visible in like the Adrenalin software. All you're gonna typically see there is core voltage, and that's it. Now, core voltage is different than seeing all those rail voltages. There's a ton of voltages happening inside your system, in your graphics card specifically, that are blind. You don't see them with the software. That's the kind of stuff you would only see during like plug-in diagnostic testing at a manufacturer level. So if something did happen there and somehow the Adrenalin software is overriding the VBIOS and there's someone put a wrong decimal point somewhere, I know it's a little more complicated than that, but still, bad things can happen. And the question is AMD gonna warranty these? These cards are still within warranty, even at 2 years old, because I believe the lowest warranty is 3 years, I believe. But I would have to assume that AMD is gonna warranty these in some way. It's just odd too, so far, that a week has gone by since this has happened, and no other repair facilities have talked about receiving any graphics cards with broken dies. This is just one place in Germany that received a chunk of them, no pun intended. And by now, I would have thought other other repair shops might have noticed this by now, if it was happening at a very widespread level. So again, this is 48 known. There's always gonna be more than what's known, but 48 of them known, localized into the Germany area, where they could have probably shipped in from different countries in Europe, but in the Germany area. Haven't seen anyone talk about this in any other region. But what you can find plenty of are people talking about instability and crashing and black screens on their 6000 series graphics cards with the most recent driver. Even if they're still working after a restart or whatever, it is all over Reddit. It is all over the forums, any forum you go to, specifically about PC enthusiasts. The 6000 series graphics cards and the latest driver definitely have a problem at the very minimum of creating stability issues. If that stability issue is related to now some sort of a new voltage issue, it might be those cards that maybe the silicon was already on the edge of its stability in the binning that are now the ones that are failing first. So don't take a chance, roll back your driver, keep an eye on it. Why can't things just work? Why do we hit over and over again? You know why I took off my glasses? Because I don't want to see this shit anymore.